It's very hard to believe that I'm here. It's too painful. How can you even understand what happened to me? The shame is so hard. You never get over this. I want to hide, but when you hide for so long, it catches up with you. To have someone lie to you for your whole life, it made me question everything. I didn't realize that there was so much evil around me.
We recovered the bodies. Certainly, there was physical force used against each of them.
Ambulances were everywhere. I couldn't understand what had happened.
Each day, investigators look for more evidence against their prime suspect.
But I had no idea that my life was in more danger. Sorry. I don't want to cry. My father was very much a family man. His name was William, and everybody else called him Bill. We did a lot of family camping and fishing. Those are my fondest memories when I was a child.
Hi, Daddy.
Hey, kiddo, what's up?
Are you going fishing?
I am.
I am the youngest of 5, and I was a typical daddy's girl.
Can I come?
Sure you can. Go up your room, get your reel.
When I was little, my dad was everything.
What is all of this?
We're just going down to the lake for a while.
But my parents were like oil and water. They were extremely toxic.
So you expect me to sit at home all day and watch the kids until you get home?
My mother never bonded with me. She was very wild, my mother. She drank a lot.
I don't understand why you can't spend a little more time at home.
Do you expect me to make you dinner every night too?
The drinking was probably the reason they had so many relationship problems.
You're never here, you're never taking care of them.
Well, look at you.
And they fought all the time.
Why don't you just go back to the bar where you live?
My mother was a free spirit, and she was never going to be controlled.
I am done.
She would go out drinking and partying, and she didn't seem to want to be a mom. I looked at my dad as the good person. I felt like my father was the one trying to keep the family together.
I'm sorry, sweetie.
When my parents would fight, and they fought all the time, sometimes she would pack up the house, and she would pack like dishes and sheets and blankets and things that we really needed and leave. My brother was kind of a mama's boy, and he was like, "Mom, don't go."
Mommy, wait!
Let go.
But I want to go with you.
Well, I don't want you to.
And she's like, "I don't love you anymore."
Stop! You're whining.
When will you be back?
I won't.
I really was not upset as much as my siblings when my mother would leave, because I never really had that close bond with my mother. But for him, it was very hard. My father would be upset, of course, and call my grandmother. So she would come over and bring everything we needed. Eventually, my mother came back. We never really talked about it again. For us, it was so common, it almost became normal. I always thought my mother was the one that was trying to tear the family apart, and that my father was always trying to keep us together. Their fights, to me, became scarier. My parents would say things like, if I can't have them, no one will. We became something that you kind of do tug of war over. I remember one incident, I woke up to my parents fighting.
I had it! Yeah, you want to leave? Fine, go! It's not like you're ever around
It
here
was a
anyway.
very intense fight. My parents were in front of me.
But you're not going to take him with you!
Oh, no!
And my mom had a gun. And she was saying that she was going to kill us if he didn't let her have us.
Are you insane?
I mean it. Back away.
I think that was the first time I was ever scared, like really terrified of my parents.
You insane!
I'd rather see them dead than with you.
If you think about almost dying, that's how scared I was as a little girl. We often slept together. All the girls slept in one bed, and all of us just wanted it to stop. We just hugged and held each other and cried.
What is the matter with you? What is the matter with you?
They fought back and forth over the gun, and my father got the gun away from my mother.
Now you get out of here! Now, go!
In my eyes, my dad was a hero. He saved us that night.
Why was Mommy doing that?
I don't know. Don't worry, I am never gonna let her harm you. Never. All right?
So at a young age, I really bonded with my dad as someone that was always going to protect me and never hurt me. So I started trusting everything that he said to me. A few months later, I remember being woken up by my mother. She put us in the car.
Everybody just needs to shut up and get in the car. Come on.
And I didn't understand where we were going. Why were we leaving at night?
Mommy! What?
Hey, where are you going? Get back here!
And I remember that feeling, being terrified. I mean, we were screaming.
Daddy, help me!
My father ran out of the house, trying to get her to stop, to not take off with us.
Next door! Come back here! You come back here with my kids! Get back here!
And she just kept going. My mother had taken us to a home that was in the Ocala National Forest. She hid us in the woods, basically. She didn't want my dad to find us. She wanted to keep us. I didn't know my father didn't know where I was. We were there maybe a few weeks, couple of months. During the day when my siblings were in school, I would be out front playing. And all of a sudden, I saw my father again, and I was excited.
Daddy!
Hey, sweetie.
My father found us. And I remember feeling a sense of relief that I was home again.
Oh my gosh, are you okay?
Uh-huh.
Yeah?
Uh-huh.
Okay, where's everybody?
At school. Mommy's inside.
Let's go get them and go home.
After that incident is when my mother lost custody of us, and I went to live with my father. It was like she was gone. My mother had no rights as far as being in our lives, and I thought that my life was always going to be great, that I would never have to worry anymore or be scared. But I had no idea that my life was in more danger. After my parents had separated and he got custody of all of us, my mother had lost all rights to us, no visitation. I think that's when my bond for my father really, really grew strong. I don't talk to my mother. There's no bond there. My father was the one that was going to save us. I was going to have a normal life. Most of all, no more fighting. This is how I remember him as a little girl. One story really sticks in my head. One day, we piled into the car and drove my sister to Jacksonville to an Alice Cooper concert.
Dad, we're gonna be late.
No, we're not.
Cut it out. Stop. Stop.
There was 5 of us. So I was whiny, and my dad was just very angry and very frustrated.
You started it. I'm gonna end it.
No, I'm gonna end it. Knock it off.
Come on.
Be quiet.
No. Nothing. I started it. No.
The next thing I remember is that I woke up. Ambulances were everywhere. I couldn't understand what had happened. All I remember is lights and people just all over the place. And my whole family was just lined up on the road. I thought they were dead. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't hurt other than a little cut. But my one brother was really bad. He had a head injury that he had to learn how to walk and talk again. My one sister had a concussion. Another sister, her scar was almost like a horseshoe on her forehead. My brother that was in the front seat, he was in a complete body cast. He had broken both of his femurs. My father broke his ribs. The steering wheel went into his chest. My father said he had fallen asleep and the car ran into a huge cement boulder on the side of the road.
I don't remember anything.
But my mother, she blamed my father for that accident. She was saying that my dad did it on purpose, that he was trying to kill us all.
This was no accident. He did this on purpose.
My mother knew from my dad's past. When my father was 3 months old, his father had done the same thing to him and his mother. He ran into something to try to kill them all. It was too similar to not be on purpose. But because my mom drank a lot, because of her past behavior, they didn't believe her.
He's trying to kill them.
They just kind of brushed her off. My mother versus my stepmother were like the opposite. My mother was, the drinker, but my stepmother was Susie Homemaker. She kept a really clean house. She loved to cook. She was a really good Southern cook. But about 2 years after they were married, I kind of realized that she wasn't as nice and loving as I thought she was gonna be.
All right, I'm gonna go out for a little. I'll see you later.
Where do you think you're going?
Just out.
Oh, no, you're not.
Sometimes my stepmother would say, "You're nothing, and you're not gonna be anything, and you're like your mother," and that was hurtful to me.
You're just like her. Irresponsible.
I remember one time my father came home and my stepmother was complaining about us.
Hey, what's going on in here?
He didn't want to hear what she had to say. He started yelling at her and telling her that he was tired of her complaining about his kids.
So I get it. So your kids are all perfect and mine are all problems.
There are rules, and she needs to follow them.
He was so angry with her, but he took it too far.
If I say it's all right, then it's all right.
Well, it's not all right.
You could see he just wanted to rip her apart, becoming very violent with her. He had this rage in his eyes. He was really scary. He was a different person at that moment.
What I say goes, and don't you ever dare tell me what I'm gonna... Get away.
My brother was able to break them up, and my stepmother ran out of the house and ran away. He went to the bedroom. I can only assume he went and got his gun. And then he came in the living room and said, "I'm gonna go get your mother, I'll be back." I had never seen him like that. I was really worried what he was going to do to my stepmom. It was a couple hours later when they came back.
Hey.
It was never talked about, but something happened when he left. She was hurt. I remember my stepmom put ice on her neck and was holding her neck. I believe that maybe he might have strangled her or hurt her neck or held her down or something, and that's why she came back. It took a while for things to get back to normal after that incident. I looked at my father differently. It took me a little bit to forgive him because I had never seen him snap like that. But because I was a daddy's girl, it didn't last. We did laundry every day with my father and my stepmother. It was like Brady Bunch. There was 9 of us, and the girls would do all the housework. One time, my sister was doing the wash, and she had noticed that my dad had blood all over his shirt and his pants.
Hey, Robin. What's that?
Looks like blood.
And so she asked him, "What happened?"
Hey, Dad.
Yeah. What?
What happened to your clothes?
And he got really mad at her and very short with her and said, "I cut my finger, don't worry about it."
Well, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
How'd you cut yourself?
Does it matter?
It was weird that there was so much blood. I don't think, unless you really cut your finger really good and have a lot of stitches, that there would be that much blood all over your clothes. But she didn't question him after he had told her that he cut his finger. We never questioned my father. If he said something, okay, that's what happened. And we never thought anything bad of my father.
I mean, just finish up and come on and help with dinner.
But now looking back on it, we wonder what really happened. I really think my father got enjoyment out of watching us clean up after him. I had no idea the evil that was really in my life at the time. My father just started acting differently. But I didn't realize that there was so much evil around me. My dad would often, about once a year, say it's time to leave. The first time, I was surprised when he told me we were moving because I was helping my father fix up the house that we had bought for a remodel. I thought we were going to stay there for a long time, and I didn't really want to move.
Be careful with those.
But my father never explained why we moved. He would just say, we're moving, and that was it.
I still don't understand why we have to move.
It's just time for a change.
From middle school to high school, we moved about 12 or 13 times, all around the county.
Do we need the money?
No,
Then why can't we stay?
because we can't. Just stop wasting time and get back to it.
No one was really questioning my father. It didn't seem to bother my stepmother, and my siblings weren't saying anything. And my father would buy used cars randomly. About once a year, he would come home with a new car. And I never understood why he would sell that car or trade it in for a new one, but he would. None of it made sense to me. Financially, we couldn't afford to do these things. It would make things harder for us. I get extreme anxiety when I move now. I connect moving to running. When we would move, we would go find a new church. For a few years, it seemed like we went to church all the time. I think it was important for my father to have a certain image in church. He would help people. He would do things for people. He was kind. People would think good of him, and it made him feel like he was getting away with things. He hid behind church, so nobody would really see my father for who he really was. That's how good my dad was at hiding his evil from everybody.
Hey.
I remember one time I was waiting for my boyfriend.
Hey.
And my dad was like, hey, I want to talk to you in the bedroom.
Hang on a second. I just want to talk to you about something. It'll just take a minute.
I didn't know what my father was going to say to my boyfriend. And I became worried and concerned and confused why my father was pulling my boyfriend into another room to have a talk with him. I couldn't really hear what was going on in the room, but it wasn't long that they were in there together. After they came out of the room, my dad just went and sat on the sofa like nothing. And then my boyfriend and I got in the car and left. And he was very quiet. And I asked him what happened, like, what did he say? What's going on?
What did he say to you?
Nothing.
Seriously, what did he want?
My boyfriend said that he threatened him.
He said if I step out of line, he'll kill me.
He said to him, you can disappear and no one will find you.
He was really creepy about it.
I kind of laughed. I really never believed in a million years. I thought he was bragging, so I let it go.
It was just a joke. I'm sure he didn't mean any of it.
My dad was a good guy. He wouldn't do those things. Never did I think that he was really serious about doing anything threatening. My dad and my stepmom came to me and told me when I was 17 that they wanted to move again, but this time out of state. And for the first time, I stood up and said, no, I'm gonna stay in one school until I finish. My father left me with my sister and my niece, and I ended up marrying my first husband and starting my own family. I found out that my stepmother had cancer, and she was very ill for about 2 years. After my stepmother died, my father just started acting differently. He took it really hard when she passed away. He really wasn't coping with it. It didn't seem like he was dealing with it very well. He was acting really strange. He was so jumpy and edgy and almost like something was eating at him. After my stepmother died, my father just started acting differently.
Hey, sweetie.
Hey, Dad.
I had gotten married and started my own family, and one time he came over with a gift.
What's that?
Oh, I brought something I thought the kids might like.
He brought out this wig. It looked like a long, blonde Dolly Parton kind of wig. He wanted to know if I wanted this wig for the kids to play dress up.
A wig? Seriously?
Yeah. Come on, they're gonna love it.
I don't know if the girls are gonna want that.
My father had told me that he was in the mall and he stopped and put his name in for a drawing and he won a wig. And I thought at the time, how odd is that to win a wig?
Hey, how are you? Hey, sweeties. Oh, I brought you something. Ready? What do you think?
I thought it was an odd gift, but my kids immediately started playing with it. They thought it was great. He snuck his evil into my house. And I think he liked that we had no idea. On the weekends when I would go visit him, we would sit and talk about how he was feeling, emotionally, because I was really concerned after my stepmom had passed away.
Hey, Dad. Sorry I'm late.
Hey, honey. That's all right. It gave me some time to get some housework done.
And one of these times that I had went to visit my father, we had an odd conversation.
So what's up with the burned up mattress out by the trash?
Decided to just go ahead and buy myself a new one.
My father said to me I needed something a little more comfortable. And then he said to me I lit it on fire and burnt it.
So you set the old one on fire?
Yeah. What?
And I thought that was very strange. Like, why would you not just throw it away? Most people just throw it away at the dump. They don't burn it.
Dad, are you okay?
Yeah, fine. Why?
The story did not make sense, and I started to think that he was losing it a little bit and really having a hard time coping with things.
You know what? Let's go and have a cup of coffee. I put a fresh spot on. Come on, sweetie. Come on.
I believe my father would tell us stories to test us to see if we could put it together, because if he could keep it from us, I think he felt like he could keep it from anybody. One time my father came over around 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, which was late for him to come over. He was acting really strange. He was so jumpy and edgy and almost like something was eating at him. It was like he couldn't sit still. He was looking around, almost like paranoid. And my husband and I at the time really questioned, like, what, is he okay? What's going on with him? Why is he acting so weird?
He all right?
I don't know. He's been acting weird all night.
Neither one of us could come up with why he was acting like that. But all I could think of was he must have really had a hard time coping with my stepmom dying.
She's been gone for a while now, and I've never seen him like this.
We're gonna go tuck the girls in. You need anything?
No, I don't need anything. I'm fine.
Usually he would stay, and in the morning I would wake up and I would cook him breakfast. And we would hang out and he would play with the kids a little bit before he went home. But this time we got up and he was gone. I just found that very odd that my father would leave without really a goodbye or breakfast. He'd never done that before. That's not like my dad. We really started to worry about him. My husband at the time was on the SWAT team, so he had a pager and he could be called at any time.
Thanks, honey.
We were out shopping and he had gotten a page from his sergeant.
Hold on, it's the station. I gotta go call in.
Okay. He went, made a phone call. I didn't think anything of it. And when he came back, he looked at me and I was like, what's going on?
Everything okay?
Actually, no.
And he told me that my father had been arrested for murder. My ex-husband told me that my father had been arrested because someone had gotten killed. I was so shocked, I couldn't believe it. I was told that my father was with a prostitute and they had gotten into a fight and she hit her head and he was afraid and dumped her body in a creek. When they put on the news about this woman that they had found, the cab driver recognized her and said, "Hey, I dropped her off at this house." And that's when they realized that he was the one that had killed her.
That can't be right. Are you sure they're talking about my dad?
They said they were gonna take him into custody.
My first thought was it was an accident. I never thought in a million years that he would do this on purpose. I was confused why he didn't call the police when it happened. And why did my dad try to hide it and cover it up? There was a detective that overheard the story about my father getting arrested, and my father's murder in North Carolina sounded very similar to some unsolved murders that he had going on in Florida.
I don't understand what you're saying.
I was still thinking that there had to have been a mistake.
Oh, that's not possible.
But the detective was telling me that the other unsolved murders were very similar to the one that my father had been arrested for. My father would pick these prostitutes up, take them to another location, kill them there, and dump them in different locations. I had a hard time believing what they were saying to me.
There must be some kind of mistake.
Not only are you wrong about the first one, but there's no way that he's been killing most of my life. And then, of course, it was on the news.
We recovered the bodies of 5 of the women. Most of these women were bludgeoned. Certainly, there was physical force used against each of them.
Each day, investigators look for more evidence against their prime suspect, William Lindsay.
I didn't believe any of it. Whatever they said to me, no, 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 until I read his confession. It's really hard to look at these pictures. My father said that he would go to find his victims where there were a lot of drugs and known prostitutes. I believe that he killed women that reminded him of my mother. That was how he dealt with his anger with my mom. He killed my mother over and over without actually killing her. The places that he had dumped a lot of the bodies were places that he took us all growing up to go fishing, to go camping. I know exactly where this place is. I was about 8 years old when I used to go fishing here. It was a way that he could go back to the crime scene and relive what he had done. I feel violated that he used a place that had a lot of joy and memories to do evil. All the moving, the cars, giving my children a wig to play with, it all fell into place. I felt that my whole life was a lie. That this person that I love so much wasn't that person. He was somebody else. When I see this picture, it makes me really sad. My father is not in this picture. I don't know who this person is. I had to train myself to unlove my father and to no longer be his daddy's girl. After my father was arrested, he had his second bout of cancer. And the last time that I saw him in prison, I knew it was going to be the last time I would ever see him. And I remember when they were wheeling him away, I just kept watching until he was gone. talk about something else, please? I hate being a daddy's girl. I really hate it. I got a phone call that he had passed away. And I thought I was going to feel that a relief and no more guilt. But that's when all the guilt fell on me. I felt like I had the burden of the things that he'd done. I felt like my dad kind of ran out on his sentence and put it on me. It was really hard for me to accept. I often ask myself if my dad loved me. And, oh God, I believe he did love us. I believe that there were two people. There was the good one and the bad one. And I think, unfortunately, the bad won a lot of times. I'm here because I hope I can let the victim's family know that there is remorse from the family. I'm sorry this happened to you, and I wish I could go back and change what happened, but you can't.
They say Brooklyn never really sleeps, but on one October night in 1998, an entire block went dead silent. No music from the bodegas, no kids on the stoop, no laughter spilling out of the basement bar on the corner, just sirens, blue and red lights flickering across cracked brick, and a cold wind pushing through empty streets like the city itself was holding its breath. A 15-year-old girl didn't come home, and from that moment on, nothing in that neighborhood was ever the same again. Her name was Lena Morales. Brown eyes, quick smile, the kind of kid who knew every shortcut between school, the subway, and the tiny third-floor apartment she shared with her mother and younger brother. She disappeared on a Thursday. Not a holiday, not a special date, just a regular school night carved into memory like a scar. She left the library at 7:42 p.m. Witnesses saw her at the intersection of 4th Avenue and 92nd Street, backpack slung over one shoulder, headphones on, head bobbing slightly to a song nobody can remember now. After that corner, after that glimpse in bad fluorescent light, the world swallowed her whole. The cops wrote it up fast. Possible runaway. Standard line, a teenager, a stressed home, a busy city, but the block didn't buy it. People in those buildings watched each other's kids through cracked blinds and open doors. They heard fights, lullabies, late-night arguments, whispered apologies. They knew the difference between a child running away and a child that simply vanishes between one streetlight and the next. Overnight, the story shifted from a missing teen to a whispered headline passed from mouth to mouth. Brooklyn 1998 cold case. Girl gone without a trace. Community in shock. You can still picture the scene if you walk there in your mind. Yellow tape blocking the sidewalk where her mother collapsed, knees hitting the concrete, fingers clawing at nothing as she begged officers to search again, to widen the perimeter, to check the alleys, the park, the abandoned lot behind the old laundromat. Her voice rose above the radios, above the static. She doesn't run away, she doesn't do that. Something happened. It was the first claim, the first accusation, the first fracture between the official story and the one the neighborhood believed. The investigation started with routine moves. Detectives from the 68th Precinct, clipboards, coffee, tired eyes. They retraced Lena's last known steps. The library staff remembered her, quiet, polite, returning a stack of books, asking if they had more crime novels, of all things. Solving puzzles, the librarian recalled. She said criminals always make mistakes. Cameras in 1998 were rare, grainy, unreliable. There was no clear footage, no easy replay button, no viral clip to analyze frame by frame. Just human memory, already bending under the pressure. Police canvassed the avenue. The deli owner said she didn't come in that night. The bus driver on the B37 route swore he didn't see her. The night clerk at the gas station a block away thought maybe he noticed a girl with a red backpack, or was that the week before? Details blurred. Times shifted. By the weekend, the story had already sprouted contradictions. One neighbor claimed they heard a scream at 8 p.m. Another was sure they saw Lena after 9, walking alone toward the water, as if pulled by something only she could see. But no one could prove anything. No one had more than a feeling. Then came the first strange detail. Officers found Lena's backpack. Not tossed, not ripped, not buried. Placed. It sat upright against a brick wall in a narrow alley between a shuttered bar and a storage space, halfway down the block from where she'd last been seen. The contents were oddly neat. Textbooks, a half-eaten granola bar, a spiral notebook with her name in looping blue ink. No wallet, no house keys, no Discman, no headphones. It was like someone had carefully removed anything that tied to time, to sound, to movement, and left only the weight of school, of routine, of normal life. A staged, still life, a quiet message. That alley became the center of the world for a few days. Crime scene techs snapped photos, dusted for prints, measured distances. But the walls were covered with years of fingerprints, soot, and grime. Anything that mattered was drowned in the noise of the city's touch. They lifted partials, smudges, unhelpful fragments. Some belonged to store owners, some to previous tenants, some to ghosts of kids who'd cut through that shortcut for years. Nothing solid, nothing clean, no neat answer. Just one more question layered on top of dozens. Rumors started to multiply, slow at first, then fast. People said a dark sedan had been parked on that corner all week. Engine idling, windows tinted. Same car, same driver, never quite visible. Others said they'd seen a man handing out flyers for a fake after-school program, standing near the subway entrance at dismissals. No name, no number, just a vague memory of a baseball cap and a heavy jacket. The block began to split between theories. Stranger abduction, someone from the neighborhood, wrong place, wrong time, planned, random, targeted. The more they tried to explain, the less any of it made sense. Detectives brought in Lena's friends, one by one. They sat in cramped interview rooms under harsh lights, fingers fidgeting with sleeves, sneakers tapping the floor. They all repeated the same truth. Lena was smart, careful, not the type to disappear voluntarily. No secret boyfriend, no known enemies, no drugs, no gang ties. She tutored younger kids at church. She walked her brother to school when her mother's shifts ran late. The worst thing anyone could accuse her of was staying up past midnight reading novels under the blanket. She was ordinary in all the ways that are supposed to keep you safe. The school held an assembly, a guidance counselor standing at a podium in the auditorium, microphone crackling, talking about safety, community, vigilance. Students filled the seats, looking at the empty chair that should have been Lena's. Her best friend sobbed quietly into her sleeve. Teachers tried to hold steady, but their eyes drifted to the door as if the girl might still burst in, late but alive, saying it was all a big misunderstanding. Outside, TV vans lined up. Reporters pointed to the school, to the street, to the alley, squeezing the whole story into 10-second sound bites. Brooklyn cold case in the making. Teen girl vanishes. Community on edge. Mysterious backpack found in alley. Days turned into weeks. Patrol cars circled slower. Detectives stopped knocking on doors every day and switched to occasional visits. Just checking in. The missing posters on lampposts began to sag, corners curling in the drizzle. Lena's face fading under the smear of rain and time. But inside apartment 3F, the case never cooled. Her mother refused to change the locks, refused to move her daughter's shoes from beside the door, refused to let anyone sit on the couch where Lena did her homework. She called the precinct every few days, demanding updates, pushing for answers, refusing to let her daughter become another name on a long list. And then came the second strange detail, the one that would haunt the case for decades. 3 months after the disappearance, a man walking his dog along the pier in Bay Ridge noticed something tucked behind a rusted trash bin. It was a cassette tape, unmarked, grimy, almost invisible against the stained concrete. He picked it up and nearly tossed it away, then hesitated. Maybe it belonged to someone. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was something. He wiped it off, put it in his pocket, and went home. Later that night, curiosity won. He dug out an old tape player, slipped the cassette in, and pressed play. What he heard would change everything and answer nothing. First static, a hiss like wind rushing through a tunnel, then footsteps, muffled breathing, faint city noise in the distance, and then a voice. Young, female, shaky. If someone finds this, I don't know where I am. A pause, a scrape, a faint thud like something being dragged. The voice again, closer now, urgent. I was on 4th and 92nd. I don't know what happened after that. Please, just tell my mom I tried. More static, a crackling sound like someone adjusting the mic. Then another voice, deeper, distorted, right next to the recorder. That's enough. A quick gasp. The tape cuts. Silence. The man didn't sleep that night. Morning couldn't come fast enough. As soon as the sun was up, he walked into the precinct and handed the cassette to the front desk officer, hands shaking. Within hours, detectives were crowded around a battered cassette player in a back room, listening on repeat. They couldn't say for sure that the voice belonged to Lena. There was no clear comparison tape, no voicemail, no clean audio sample, but her mother, when they dared to play it for her, broke down. "That's her," she insisted. "I know my daughter's voice." Her certainty hit harder than any lab report. Audio experts weighed in. The recording was degraded, likely copied, possibly edited. Background sounds suggested a confined space, maybe a basement or interior room. Faint echoes bouncing back. The hum of a distant appliance. No clear clues. No obvious landmarks. The second voice, the one that said, "That's enough," was harder to pin down. Male. Calm. Not shouting. Not panicked. Controlled. Composed. He didn't sound like someone in a rage. He sounded like someone following a plan. The media got wind of the tape and turned it into a headline. Mysterious cassette emerges in Brooklyn, 1998 disappearance, kidnap recording, or cruel hoax. For every person convinced the tape was real, there was someone who thought it was staged, a copycat, a prank timed to reignite fear. The police couldn't publicly confirm its authenticity. Chain of custody was shaky. No one knew how long it had been sitting by that trash bin, who had handled it, where it had been before. But that didn't stop the theories. Some said the man who found it was involved. Others said the tape was a coded message from the abductor, a taunt, a challenge, a message not to the police but to the neighborhood. "I'm still here. I'm still watching." The cassette became the heart of the case. Every few weeks, someone claimed to recognize the second voice. A landlord swore it sounded like a former tenant who'd disappeared without paying rent. A coworker said it reminded him of a supervisor who'd suddenly transferred out of state. A teenager insisted it matched a creepy guy who used to hang around the arcade. Detectives followed each lead, cross-referenced alibis, checked employment records, searched basements and storage units. Nothing stuck. No fingerprints on the tape, no identifying noises in the background. Just that one chilling phrase, over and over, "That's enough." By the time the new millennium rolled in, the case file on Lena's disappearance had grown thick, heavy, swollen with reports, transcripts, and dead ends. It was officially classified as a cold case, but that label never really fit on that block. Every siren, every scream in the distance, every unfamiliar car creeping past late at night triggered the same thought. Is it him? Is it connected? Did they miss something? The story had stopped being just about one girl. It had become a kind of urban legend, whispered to new tenants, caution to children, woven into the DNA of everyday life. Brooklyn moved forward, but this one mystery kept dragging the community back to that October night in 1998, to that alley, that backpack, that tape pack. Years later, the headline would change. New detectives would arrive. Old evidence would be pulled from storage and run through new machines. And suddenly, officially, the words would appear on paper. Brooklyn, 1998, cold case, solved. But solve is a clean word, sharp and final, and nothing about this story is clean or final. Not the tape, not the alley, not the faces of the people who still look over their shoulders when they walk past that corner, wondering if the person responsible is behind them or right in front of them. The tape should have been the turning point, the big break, the moment when everything snapped into focus. Instead, it became another fracture line, another shadow laid over a case already drowning in them. Years ticked by. Officers transferred, retired, moved to other precincts. The cassette was boxed, labeled, stored in a climate-controlled evidence room deep in the belly of a Brooklyn facility where thousands of tragedies slept on metal shelves. It sat there, wound tight around its tiny reels, holding a girl's last words and a stranger's command, waiting for technology to catch up to its secrets. Out on the block, life kept grinding forward. The laundromat downstairs got new owners. The corner bodega switched hands twice. Kids who'd watched search parties fan out when they were in middle school grew up, got jobs, moved away, but they carried the story like a bruise under the skin. Don't walk alone at night. Call me when you're on the train. Stay on the main streets. It wasn't just advice, it was doctrine. Lena's name appeared whenever the news ran a segment on unsolved crimes. Her school photo, that awkward in-between smile, flashed across screens, then vanished again into the static. Her mother refused to give interviews after the first few years. The cameras had taken enough. They'd filmed her crying, filmed her silent, filmed her staring out the window at a street that no longer felt like hers. Eventually, she learned to live in a quiet that wasn't peace but exhaustion. She still set a place at the table for three sometimes. She still heard footsteps in the hallway and thought for a split second that a key would rattle in the door and her daughter would appear, older, changed, but alive. That second always shattered the same way. Empty hallway, locked door, nothing but the hum of the building. In 2015, nearly 17 years after Lena vanished, a new detective was assigned to the cold case unit. His name was Daniel Vega. Brooklyn-born, Puerto Rican father, Irish mother, the kind of cop who'd grown up around stories like Lena's, watching his neighborhood collect ghosts, unresolved and unspoken. He didn't believe in miracles, but he believed in patterns, in mistakes, in the simple truth that people carry traces of what they do. Give him enough time, enough data, enough dust, and he thought he could find them. The Morales file landed on his desk with a dull thud and a casual line from his lieutenant. Heartbreaker, don't let it eat you alive. Vega opened the box and smelled old paper, stale air, the faint plastic tang of evidence bags. He flipped through reports dated in ballpoint ink. Handwritten notes from detectives who'd long since left the job. Typed witness statements, some barely legible after years of photocopying and filing. Photos of the alley, the backpack, the cassette. He lingered on the picture of the tape, then hunted through the inventory list for its storage location. He didn't just want to read about this case, he wanted to hear it. In a sterile lab room housing the department's updated audio tech, Vega watched a specialist slip on gloves, unwrap the cassette, and feed it into a modern system that digitized every hiss, every crackle, every breath. The old recorder from '98 had been replaced with waveform displays and spectral analysis software that painted sound as color and shape. The expert adjusted levels, filtered out background noise, isolated frequencies. On the screen, the voices appeared as jagged streaks of energy. Lena's voice, if it was hers, emerged clearer than it had for the original detectives. The fear was more obvious now. The tremor, the rushed breathing, the way her words seemed to push against something unseen. I was on 4th and 92nd. I don't know what happened after that. Please, just tell my mom I tried. Vega felt his jaw tighten. 17 years collapsed into a single second. This wasn't a case file. This was a girl talking from a locked moment in time, trapped between an ordinary walk home and whatever came next. He asked the tech to loop the second voice, the calm male tone that everyone had obsessed over. They scrubbed away static, leveled the volume, sharpened consonants. Each time the phrase played, it dug a little deeper. That's enough. Neutral, unhurried, not barking a command. Saying it like a line he'd rehearsed. The expert compared the vocal signature to existing databases, known offenders, recorded interrogations, internal recordings from officers and staff. Nothing matched. The voice existed in a blank space, just out of reach, but the new software picked up something the older systems hadn't flagged. Behind the voices, buried in the low frequencies, was a faint, irregular sound repeating at uneven intervals. Not traffic, not footsteps. A mechanical rhythm. Vega leaned closer as the tech isolated it. The pattern grew clearer, a whirring, shuddering clank, followed by a pause, then another clank, like old machinery cycling, a compressor, a pump, a failing motor. They ran that sound through an environmental database. The match wasn't perfect, but it was close. Old industrial refrigeration unit, the kind used in walk-in freezers, storage coolers, aging warehouses still limping along with decades-old equipment. Suddenly, the tape wasn't just a voice in darkness. It was a voice in a specific kind of darkness, somewhere near a machine struggling to keep something cold. A map began to form in Vega's mind. 4th and 92nd, the alley, the backpack placed, not dropped, and somewhere near there, within a certain radius, a space with an old refrigeration unit humming in the background. He pulled up records, cross-referenced city inspections, health department violations, commercial rentals from the late '90s. Names of restaurants, butcher shops, storage facilities. Many were gone now, replaced by condos or shuttered storefronts. But some had histories, paper trails, complaints. The list of possible locations shrank from an entire borough to a handful of addresses. One address kept coming back, a small, family-run grocery that used to sit 3 blocks from Lena's school on a side street most people only used to cut between avenues. In 1998, it had a rear storage area and a walk-in cooler powered by an aging unit that neighbors complained about constantly. Too loud, too erratic, kept them up at night with its jerky start-stop routine. The shop had closed in 2001. The owner sold the building, moved out of state. No clear violations, no record of violent incidents, just noise complaints and a few fines for cluttered exits. On paper, boring. On a map, uncomfortably close. Vega drove out to the block. The grocery was gone, replaced by an upscale coffee shop with big windows and minimalist decor. People typed on laptops where shelves of canned beans and dusty candy racks used to stand. Behind the building, though, the bones were older. The alleyway was tight, walls stained, a metal door half rusted into its frame leading to what used to be the storage area. The detective stood there for a long moment, listening to the muted rumble of the city. No failing compressor now. No clank, just the distant whoosh of traffic and the occasional slam of a dumpster lid. The building's new owner reluctantly let him into the basement. Fresh drywall and polished concrete tried to erase the past, but the original layout was still visible if you knew how to look. A rectangular space, the kind that could easily have housed a walk-in cooler. Old bolt marks in the floor. Discolored patches on the wall where something large had once been mounted. Vega didn't say what he was thinking, but the idea hung in the air. This could have been the room, the space where the tape was recorded, the place where a 15-year-old girl spoke into the void, hoping someone would eventually hear her. He ordered a ground-penetrating radar scan of the basement, standard procedure in a case where a victim's body had never been found. The operators swept the machine back and forth, watching the screen for anomalies. Buried pipes, structural elements, anything denser than the surrounding soil. For a few stomach-tightening minutes, the instrument flagged an irregular shape near the western wall. Too small to be a car, too large to be standard plumbing. The room went quiet as everyone stared at the data. Then the tech adjusted settings, recalibrated, and the anomaly resolved into overlapping construction debris from an old renovation. Broken concrete, rebar, nothing else. Another spike of hope flattened into nothing. Meanwhile, Vega worked the human side. He tracked down the former grocery owner, now living in Florida, retired, health failing. The man answered questions slowly, with the fog of age mixing into every answer. Yes, he remembered the complaints about the cooler. Yes, he stayed late some nights. No, he never saw the girl, hadn't even heard of the case until the news started showing her picture. He sounded genuinely horrified when Vega mentioned the possibility that his store's basement might have been used by someone else, for something else, without his knowledge. A stock boy, a delivery driver, a cousin who knew where keys were hidden. The past became a tangle of half-remembered names. The detective also pulled the old witness statements again. This time he looked not just at what people said, but what they didn't say. Who'd been vague about their whereabouts, who'd moved away soon after, who'd changed phone numbers, changed stories, changed lives. One name began to glow faintly in the margins. A part-time worker at the grocery in '98, early 20s, lived alone, no family nearby. He'd been interviewed back then, briefly. Did you see this girl? No. Notice anything unusual? No. Hear about the tape? Just what was on the news. Nothing stood out about him at the time. No priors, no outbursts, just another face in the stack of transcripts. But Vega found something the original detectives hadn't had, a later arrest. In 2005, the same man had been picked up in another state on charges related to unlawful confinement of a girlfriend. She'd escaped. He'd taken a plea, served a short sentence. On the record, it looked like a domestic case. Ugly but contained. Off the record, the details were darker. The girlfriend described being locked in a small room, hearing an old machine grinding in the background. The complaint mentioned some kind of industrial fridge in the adjacent space. Different state, different city, same pattern, same sound. The detective's pulse kicked up. He requested the file, listened to recorded interviews, read every word. When he closed his eyes, he could overlay the girlfriend's description on top of the audio from the tape. A tight space, a humming unit, a man who liked control, who liked to decide when something had gone far enough. That's enough. The phrase seemed more sinister now, not just a command to stop recording, but a line drawn in his own mind, an internal limit only he understood. Vega brought his theory to the cold case unit. It wasn't proof, it wasn't a confession, but it was more than they'd had in years. A former part-time worker with a documented history of confinement, a connection to old refrigeration units, and a direct link to the very building whose basement matched the environmental sound on the tape. The room fell quiet as he laid out timelines, maps, audio comparisons. Someone finally said what everyone was thinking. If he did it, why Lena? Why that night? Motive, the missing piece. They dug into his history. Work schedules from '98 confirmed he'd been assigned to closing shift at the grocery on several Thursdays, including the night Lena went missing. A delivery log showed an order arriving late that evening, around 8, just as she would have been walking home. The man would have been in and out of the alley behind the store, moving boxes, propping the back door open. He would have seen people passing, teens, workers, neighbors. One of them could have been a girl with a red backpack and headphones on. What happened between seeing and taking is something no report can capture. Maybe he offered a shortcut through the store, out of the cold. Maybe he said he'd seen something fall from her bag, lured her closer with a small lie. Maybe he simply grabbed her, fast and precise, pulling her through a half-open door in the second between one passerby and the next. The alley, the backpack placed neatly later, the cassette dropped months after. It all lined up as if following an invisible blueprint. But lining up isn't enough in a courtroom. The suspect had moved again since his release. Different town, quiet job, keeping his head down. The statute of limitations meant certain charges were no longer possible. For murder, there was no such limit, but they had no body, no direct physical evidence tying him to Lena, no DNA, no fingerprints, no witnesses ready to swear they'd seen him with her. Just the tape, the pattern, the echo of that phrase ricocheting through decades. Vega knew what the paperwork would say if he pushed this case toward closure too fast. Circumstantial resolution. Likely offender identified. Case considered solved for investigative purposes. A cold, clean stamp on a messy, bleeding question. Brooklyn wanted an answer. The department wanted a win. The family wanted a name, a face, someone to point a shaking finger at in a courtroom. But deep down, the detective felt the weight of a different truth. Sometimes saying solved is just another way of saying we're too tired to keep chasing ghosts. He kept moving anyway, requested a fresh interview, pushed for surveillance, dug deeper into the suspect's online life, his searches, his habits. Somewhere in the data, in the history of clicks and late-night patterns, Vega hoped there would be one mistake, one careless trace, one digital fingerprint as undeniable as blood on a wall. Because if he didn't find it, if the case ended on a hunch and a whisper, that phrase on the tape would haunt more than just a basement. It would haunt every decision that followed, every cold case file waiting on his desk, stamped with those same quiet, dangerous words. That's enough. The suspect's name was Michael Caro, and on paper he was nothing special. No infamous record, no trail of headlines, just a man who knew how to keep his head down and his hands busy in jobs nobody remembered. Stock boy, night clerk, warehouse helper, always somewhere near the back door, always somewhere near the cold. His file was thin, his photo ordinary, the kind of face you could pass on the street 1,000 times and never notice. But once Vega saw his name tied to that grocery, tied to that old cooler, tied to that later arrest for confinement, it was like a headline burned across the top of the case file. Brooklyn, 1998 cold case, quiet worker under new suspicion. He didn't go in loud, no squad cars, no flashing lights, just a knock on a weathered door in a quiet rental complex 3 states away, early enough in the morning to catch a man before he'd fully put his mask on. Caro opened the door in a faded t-shirt and sweats, eyes glassy from sleep or something deeper. For a moment, his gaze slid over Vega like he was nobody, salesman, neighbor, wrong address. Then he saw the badge. It was subtle, but the shift was there, a tiny tightening at the jaw. A flick behind the eyes, like a man who'd been waiting for this knock, even if he'd told himself for years it would never come. Routine follow-up, Vega said, voice steady, casual. Old case, long time ago, Brooklyn. Mind if we talk? There's a particular kind of silence that answers that question. Not outrage, not fear. A slow, measuring quiet, as if the person on the other side of it is running through old footage in their head, checking how much they left behind. Caro stepped back, opened the door wider, and gestured the detective inside. The apartment was neat in that almost obsessive way. No clutter, no random piles, everything folded, aligned, placed. The hum of a refrigerator in the corner sounded louder than it needed to, a steady, low vibration that made the glasses in the cabinet faintly tremble. They sat at a small table. Vega watched his hands. Calm, no tapping, no fidgeting, a man used to answering questions. The detective started soft. Work history, memories of the grocery store, the noise from the cooler, the complaints from neighbors. Caro answered with an easy shrug. Old place, old equipment, drove me crazy too, but it was a job. He laughed once, a short, dry sound that didn't reach his eyes. Then Vega said the name. Do you remember a girl, Lena Morales? Caro's expression didn't crack, but it changed. A fraction, a split-second delay before the denial. No, don't think so. We had a lot of customers, kids in and out. I don't remember names from back then. It was the answer Vega expected, but he wasn't here just to ask questions. He was here to listen for echoes. He slid a small recorder across the table. We've still got evidence from that case, he said. An audio tape, a girl's voice maybe, and another voice, a man, saying just 2 words. He didn't press play. He didn't need to. I was wondering if you'd let me record you reading a line for comparison. Standard thing. Caro's jaw flexed again. What line? That's enough, Vega said quietly. The room tightened around those words. The hum of the fridge pressed in. The detective watched the older man's throat work around a swallow. For a moment, Caro looked like he wanted to stand up, walk out, end this. Then something shifted. His shoulders loosened. His voice dropped a note. Sure, he said, picking up the recorder, rolling it between his fingers like it might bite, if it helps you close a file. He spoke the phrase once. That's enough. Clean, flat, no obvious tremor. Vega asked him to repeat it in a different tone, more annoyed, louder, quieter, offhand. Each time the words cut through the small kitchen, sliding over the detective's skin like a memory he didn't own. He thanked Caro, pocketed the recorder, and left without pushing harder. No accusations, no outright claims, just an officer doing due diligence, listing one voice next to another in a long column of possibilities. Back in Brooklyn, the lab lined up the recordings, old tape against new digital file. The software didn't deal in feelings, it dealt in data. Waveforms, peaks and valleys, patterns in the way consonants hit, vowels stretch, throats tighten around certain sounds. The program spat out probabilities, not a match, not a perfect overlay, but an uncomfortable proximity, enough to raise the hair on your arms. Not enough to drag a man back across state lines in cuffs. Word of the renewed investigation leaked. It always does. A freelancer chasing cold cases picked it up first, posting a short piece online about Brooklyn's silent ghost, why the 1998 disappearance of a schoolgirl still haunts the borough. The article mentioned modern tech, revisited suspects, hinted at a former employee of a long-defunct local grocery. Names weren't printed, but the neighborhood didn't need them. People connected dots, whispered on stoops, called old friends who'd moved away. The rumor machine spun up to full speed. They've got someone. It was the stock boy all along. They're finally going to solve it. The Morales family heard it too. You can't hide a new wave of hope from a mother who's lived in the shadow of an unsolved crime for nearly 2 decades. Vega went to see her before the gossip did. She was older now, hair streaked with gray, shoulders slightly bent under years of grief she'd learned to carry like a permanent weight. She opened the door, and for a heartbeat, he saw the young detective from the old news footage standing behind him. The one who'd promised answers and never delivered. "Have you found her?" she asked. No hello, no preamble. He shook his head, honest. "Not yet." "But you found him," she said. Not a question, a statement knitted out of rumor and instinct. "We found someone who might be important to the case," he answered. "I can't promise more than that." She let him inside. The apartment was the same and not the same. Different couch, same weight in the air. The photos on the wall had multiplied. Lena at 15, frozen in time. Her younger brother, now a grown man, in graduation robes, in a work uniform, in candid shots with friends where his smile always seemed to sag at the corners. An empty frame sat on a shelf, leaning forward slightly, as if waiting for the picture that should have filled it. "I dream of her walking in," her mother said quietly. "Not as a child, as a woman. I try to remember what her face would look like now, but my mind, it stops. It always stops." She looked at Vega, her eyes sharp despite the years. "If you say the words 'case closed' to me without a body, I will not accept it. Do you understand me?" He did. More than she knew. Because while the department wanted resolution, what he saw when he opened that file wasn't just a case number. It was a street corner at 7:42 p.m. It was a red backpack against a wall. It was a cassette sitting by a trash bin, waiting to be found by a man walking his dog. It was 2 words spoken in a calm male voice that sounded more like habit than panic. "That's enough." But somewhere out there, someone else was listening to that same voice for different reasons. The freelancer's article had stirred more than just neighborhood memory. True crime forums picked up the story. Threads lit up with titles like Brooklyn 1998 Mystery, New Lead, and The Tape That Won't Die. People dissected every known detail. They mapped the route from the library to Lena's apartment. They analyzed the alley where the backpack was found. They dug up old photos of the grocery store, grainy shots from community event flyers, a sign in the window advertising cheap soda and lottery tickets. One user claimed to have been a kid in the area back then. They remembered a man who worked behind the counter at the grocery, quiet but intense, always watching the kids a little too closely, always lingering when teenage girls came in after school. Another user said they'd worked a summer in the same building years later and had heard stories about the creepy guy who used to work nights. None of it was sworn testimony. None of it would hold up in court, but online the narrative hardened fast. He did it. Case solved. Only it wasn't. Not officially, not legally, not in a way that would ever satisfy the line on a death certificate or the blank space where a body should be laid to rest. Vega read the posts, not because he trusted them, but because sometimes, buried in the noise, there was a small specific detail that only someone who'd really been there would know. A nickname, a habit, a throwaway line, something that could be tugged into a lead. Then one night a new post appeared. No username with history, no playful avatar, just a blank account created that day. The message was short, written like a bullet fired into a crowded room. "You're all talking like you were there. You weren't. You didn't hear her. You didn't hear him. Cassette wasn't the first. It was just the one you found." Vega saw a screenshot of the post before moderators removed it for violating community rules. It bounced through the cold case unit like a spark. The idea that there might be more tapes, other recordings, other attempts to speak out from that confined, humming space, turned the floor cold under everyone's feet. If it was a troll, it was a cruel one. If it wasn't, then the case was more complicated than a single night in 1998. He subpoenaed the forum, traced IP logs, followed digital breadcrumbs that twisted through VPNs and throwaway emails. The path ended in a dead zone, a public Wi-Fi connection used by dozens of people every day. No clear origin, no neat answer, just one more whisper added to the chorus. But the content of the post stuck in his mind. Cassette wasn't the first. He went back through the evidence logs looking for anything that even vaguely resembled that tape. Unidentified audio, miscellaneous media. Items written off as irrelevant years ago. In a dusty box misfiled under another case, he found it. A second cassette, recovered from a trash pickup route in 1999, labeled simply, "Unknown, no identifiable content." The accompanying report said the tape contained mostly static and garbled noise, no clear voices, no obvious connection to any active investigation at the time. It had been half recorded over, then tossed. Vega had it digitized. The initial playback sounded like chaos, static, warped audio, snatches of sound crushed under a layer of hiss. For a moment he thought the original detectives had been right, that it was nothing. Then the tech filtered, cleaned, adjusted, peeled back layers like old wallpaper. Underneath, faint but real, a voice emerged. Different cadence, maybe different girl, but the shape of terror was unmistakable. "Please," she whispered, barely audible. "Please, I don't want to—" The sentence cut off, devoured by distortion. And behind her, again, the hum, that same mechanical rhythm, that same sick heartbeat of failing machinery grinding away in the dark. The tape was shorter than the first, more damaged. Whatever had been recorded over it had chewed through some of the original sound. But one thing survived, clear as a bell ringing in a locked room. At the very end, before the tape clicked, the man's voice slipped through the static, distorted but still recognizable. "That's enough." 2 tapes now, 2 voices pleading, one voice ending the recording. Suddenly, this wasn't just the story of one girl on one night in Brooklyn. This was a pattern, a ritual, a soundscape repeating itself inside a radius of streets people had walked for years without ever knowing what kind of echoes lay just beneath the surface. The headline in Vega's head changed again. Brooklyn 1998 cold case. New tape suggests serial predator linked to missing teen. The weight of it pressed down on him because if there were 2 tapes, there could have been 3 or 5 or 10. And if a man like Caro had found a way to operate in the cracks between alleys and basements, between industrial refrigerators and forgotten storage rooms, how many girls had slipped through those cracks without anyone ever drawing a straight line between them? The department wanted to move. Faster, harder. "If he's done this before, he'll do it again," one commander said in a closed-door meeting. "We can't wait for a perfect bow on this. We have to protect whoever's next." The pressure to push an arrest, to finally stamp the word "solved" across that aging file, rose like floodwater. But Vega stood in the back of the room, thinking not about paperwork, but about a mother staring at an empty frame on a shelf and a girl's voice on a tape saying, "Tell my mom I tried." On his desk, the case file lay open, edges frayed, pages crinkled. Next to it, 2 digitized waveforms glowed on a monitor, blue lines trembling with the shape of fear and control. Somewhere out there, a man who might have spoken those words into the dark was making coffee, washing dishes, staring at his own aging face in a bathroom mirror. Somewhere he was telling himself a story about what he did and didn't do, what he did and didn't deserve. And in Brooklyn, on that same October block where it had all started, the air still felt different at night. Old-timers said you could hear something if you walked past the alley after midnight and let yourself listen beyond the traffic. Not a scream, not a cry for help, just a faint mechanical hum in your head like a memory of a machine that wasn't there anymore. A ghost noise, a reminder, a warning. The second tape changed the air in the squad room. It made the walls feel closer, the ceiling lower, the fluorescent lights harsher. You could feel it in the way people moved, quicker, sharper, as if every step might kick loose another buried secret. 2 tapes meant something more than coincidence. 2 tapes meant ritual. Someone had done this more than once, in more than one place, and for some reason they'd hit record. Not to confess, not to brag, almost like they wanted a witness, but only on their terms. A private audience of one, a future listener they'd never meet. Vega played the new digital file on a loop in his office, sound turned low, eyes closed as he tried to separate the layers, static, a hiss like a cheap mic rubbing against fabric. Then the girl's voice, ghost thin and warped by time, not Lena, different tone, different way of clipping words short. But fear doesn't change. It vibrates at a frequency the body recognizes, that tremor, that breath catching halfway through a plea. It hit him the same way. "Please," she whispered, "please, I don't want to." And then the sound warped, stretched, fell apart. The tech had done everything possible to clean it, but some damage couldn't be undone. Over-recorded fragments bled into the background, snatches of a radio broadcast, a song, something like a sports announcer calling a play. It meant the cassette had lived a life after the recording. Someone had taped over it and then tossed it, like a memory they didn't want to hold on to, but also couldn't be bothered to destroy completely. Careless or deliberate, it was impossible to say, but that single clear line at the end survived, like it had been carved into the tape with a knife. That's enough. Reduced, distorted, but still him, still that same calm note, still that same terrible finality. The report from '99 said the tape had been found in a different borough, picked up with regular trash, no obvious link to any missing persons case. No one had connected it to Lena because back then, the cassette from the pier had already been written off as a possible hoax. 2 weird tapes, no shared names, no shared dates, just noise. Now, with software that could trace the hum of that old compressor like a fingerprint, the noise was suddenly a signature. The hum and the voice walked hand in hand. Vega widened his search. He pulled files on girls reported missing between 1996 and 2000 along the transit lines that intersected Brooklyn and the neighboring borough where the second tape had emerged. Names, faces, some found, some not, some confirmed as runaways who resurfaced years later, others buried under different headlines. He wasn't chasing panic. He was chasing overlap, routes, jobs, properties, anywhere the suspect, the grocery, and that distinct mechanical sound might intersect. Caro's work history read like a roadmap of the forgotten corners of the city and beyond. Stockrooms, refrigerated warehouses, convenience stores with humming coolers that never quite kept the drinks cold enough. After his stint at the Brooklyn grocery, he'd bounced between similar jobs, sometimes for months, sometimes only for weeks. Each place had a back room. Each back room had a door that didn't face the street. Each one had that one quiet space where the public didn't go and the cameras never reached. The girlfriend from the 2005 confinement case agreed to a video call. She lived out west now, under a new name. Her eyes flickered between anger and something like shame as she talked. He liked control, she said, voice tight. Not yelling, not punching walls, just control, the way you might arrange things on a shelf. He'd decide when I could eat, when I could sleep, when I could leave the room. He'd stand in the doorway and listen to the freezer unit next door, and he'd say it sounded like a heartbeat, like the building was alive. The phrase lodged itself in Vega's mind. A heartbeat, a building alive, a man standing in a doorway listening to a machine and hearing something human in it. Did he ever record you, the detective asked? Audio, video, anything? She paused, frowned, shook her head, then stopped. He had a little recorder, she said slowly, one of those cheap handheld ones. He said it helped him remember things, grocery lists, work schedules. Once I woke up and it was on the floor next to the bed, red light on. He said it fell there by accident. I didn't believe him, but I also didn't want to know. You don't get warrants for accidents and suspicions, you get them for evidence, probable cause, hard lines. But every story Vega collected built a shape around Caro that kept matching the negative space in the tapes. A man drawn to cold rooms, to humming machines, to doors with locks on the inside. A man who liked to decide when something had gone as far as it should. That's enough wasn't just a phrase, it was a rule he lived by. Back in Brooklyn, the neighborhood around 4th and 92nd felt like an old scar someone had suddenly started pressing on again. People gave more interviews. Some who'd kept quiet for years decided, without quite knowing why, that it was time to talk. An older woman on the block remembered seeing a man in a work jacket leaning against the alley wall around the time of the disappearance, not on the night itself, but in the weeks before. He'd smoke and watch the kids go by, she said. Didn't say much, just stood there, like he was waiting for something to fall into his hands. She hadn't said it in '98. The cops were everywhere back then, she admitted. I didn't want to accuse the wrong person. And to be honest, I didn't think what I saw mattered. Lots of men stand around smoking. But after I heard about the tape again, I remembered his face, the way he didn't move much, just his eyes. Vega showed her a recent photo of Caro. The woman stared at it for a long time, eyes tracing the lines of an older face over the bones of memory. He could be, she said finally. He could be him. But I'm not going to swear to it, not after this long. Time plays tricks. Time was the enemy in every line of this investigation. Memories blurred, buildings changed hands, machines were replaced. Records got lost in moves and system upgrades. What was solid in 1998 now crumbled in his hands whenever he tried to grab it. But the tapes were stubborn. They refused to fade. Each time he heard the word please, followed by that calm, that's enough. He felt like someone had carved those 2 syllables into the spine of the city. Pressure climbed. The cold case unit held another strategy meeting. Someone from the DA's office sat in, flipping through the growing stack of supplementary reports. You've got pattern, she said. You've got behavioral consistencies. You've got proximity, but you don't have direct forensic evidence. You bring me this as is, we get a media circus and a hung jury, if it even goes to trial. Worse, we give him a shot at walking away clean, and then he's untouchable on this case. So we wait? Vega asked, feeling the word like a stone in his mouth. We build, she replied. You said it yourself. This guy likes patterns. Patterns mean repetition. That means his past is messy. Somewhere out there, there's someone else he hurt who's still alive, or someone who helped him without understanding what they were part of. We find them, we get leverage, we find property records, storage units, old lockers, anything. We pull on every thread until something gives. It was the right answer, but it landed like a sentence. More waiting, more nights listening to voices from the past while a potential killer made breakfast in the present. Vega left the meeting and walked until the city noise swallowed his thoughts. Past the pier where the first cassette had been found. Past the corner where Lena was last seen. Past the alley where her backpack had been placed like a silent exhibit. At each spot, he stopped long enough to imagine the suspect there, moving through the scene, making choices. Where to stand, where to watch, where to leave something behind. In the quiet of his small apartment later that week, sleepless and wired on bad coffee, he opened his laptop and did something he shouldn't have. He scrolled the true crime threads. The second tape had leaked now, at least in description. People theorized about the unknown girl's identity, connecting her to every unsolved missing persons case within 100 miles of Brooklyn. Armchair profilers wrote paragraphs about the abductor's psychology based on a single phrase and a background hum. Everybody wanted a story that made sense. Everybody wanted a monster they could point to and say, there, that's him. That's where the darkness lives. Buried deep in a long thread past the memes and wild theories, Vega found a short comment that made his fingers freeze over the trackpad. You're all missing the obvious, it read. You're so obsessed with the tapes, you forgot what he took first. No explanation, no follow-up, just that one sentence dropped like a clue or a taunt. He requested the user data through official channels this time, forcing himself to stay inside the lines. The same problem as before. Public Wi-Fi, anonymized access, no clean trail. Maybe it was the same person who'd written about there being more tapes. Maybe it was a copycat echoing the style of the first anonymous poster. Or maybe it was him, the man who liked patterns, the man who'd watched the story of his own violence morph into online entertainment and decided to push the narrative from behind a keyboard. What he took first. The words rolled around in Vega's head as he pulled old boxes from storage again. Not the girl, not the voice, not the tape. Something else, something before the abductions, before the recordings. What was the first theft? Time? Safety? No, that was too abstract. He flipped through property records for the grocery again, eyes scanning for anything that had shifted hands just before Lena vanished. Equipment sales, renovations, licenses. There it was, tucked into a side note on a city inspection form. 2 months before October 1998, the grocery's old refrigeration contractor had gone out of business. Unpaid invoices, complaints about delays, equipment failures. The owner switched to a cheaper independent technician recommended by a friend of a friend. No company name, just a last name and a phone number scribbled in the margin. Caro. Not just a stock boy then, not just another pair of hands in the storeroom. A man who knew machines, who went where the compressors lived, who could get into basements and back rooms under the pretense of fixing something everyone depended on but nobody wanted to think about until it broke. What he took first might not have been people at all. It might have been access, keys. Knowledge of which doors stuck and which locks were never changed. Vega followed that line hard. Old service logs, handwritten receipts, canceled checks. Caro had done freelance refrigeration work all over the borough in the late 90s, moving in and out of back rooms that had no cameras and no witnesses. Restaurants, delis, butcher shops, a small ice cream plant on the outskirts of the city. Places where the hum of machines would have been loud enough to hide any number of sounds. He could see the headline forming in front of him now. Brooklyn 1998 cold case. Suspect linked to dozens of cold rooms across city. But headlines weren't handcuffs. Headlines weren't justice. They were narratives. And narratives could bend. The more the story took shape in the media's hands, the more careful he had to be. Because if they painted Caro too clearly as the monster and somehow failed to nail him down with law, the case would flip from unsolved to unprosecutable. And that was worse. That was a wound you couldn't even legally reopen. The next move had to be precise. Vega put in for a warrant to search a storage unit under Caro's name, rented 15 years earlier in a neighboring state and paid in cash for long enough to go unnoticed. The paper trail was weak but present, an old forwarding address, a copy of an ID. The unit was listed as empty now, but records said it had been cleared out only 2 years after Lena vanished. He wanted to see what had been left, what had been discarded, what dust patterns might still tell a story. The judge signed off. The facility manager met them there, jangling keys, annoyed at being dragged into a cold case on a weekday morning. The unit's metal door rolled up with a reluctant screech, revealing exactly what Vega expected and feared. Nothing. Bare concrete, dust, the faint stale smell of old cardboard and oil. The manager crossed his arms. Told you. Cleared. We rent by the month. We don't keep people's junk. But the detective stepped inside anyway, stood at the center, turned slowly. He wasn't looking for objects. He was looking for echoes, scuff marks on the floor where something heavy had once sat, screw holes in the wall, a patch of discoloration where cold had leached through metal. He saw ghosts of rectangles, maybe a metal rack, maybe a large box, maybe something like a portable refrigeration unit, the kind used temporarily when a main system failed. He closed his eyes and listened. No hum now, no mechanical heartbeat. Just the faint rush of air from the outer hallway and the sound of his own breathing. But in his head he could hear it, the same rattling whir from the tapes, overlaid on the present like a third soundtrack only he could access. A room like this at the right time with the right equipment could have been anything. A workspace, a prison, a studio for recording the worst moments of someone's life. When he stepped back out into the pale daylight, something in him hardened. The case wasn't solved, not really, not in a way he could yet prove. But he was done pretending this was just about one girl taking the wrong route home. Someone had turned cold spaces into hunting grounds. Someone had threaded themselves through the infrastructure of a city that needed its machines to run even when nobody wanted to think about what sat behind the walls. And somewhere, in a small apartment far from Brooklyn, a man who'd once leaned against an alley wall with a cigarette in hand and an easy, watchful stare glanced at the news updates pushed to his phone. He saw his old burrow trending again, his decade-old job reduced to a line in a lurid article. He saw the words, new suspect, new tapes, possible serial predator. He read them calmly, thumb scrolling, heart rate steady as he finished his coffee and looked up at his own refrigerator, humming softly in the corner. That's enough, he murmured to the empty room, not as a confession, not as a surrender, but as a decision. A quiet line, drawn in the sand, only he could see. Whether he meant enough running, enough hiding, or enough waiting for someone else to control the story, no one was there to ask. All that existed in that moment was a man, a machine, and the low, steady hum of cold air pushing through metal, carrying secrets only the walls remembered. For men like him, decisions never arrive as thunder. They come as a small, almost boring thought that slides in between the ordinary ones. Buy milk, answer that email, decide what to do about the detective from Brooklyn. The words on his phone screen faded to black as it locked. He set it face down on the table, stood, and walked to the window. Outside, the parking lot of his modest complex glowed under cheap sodium lights. Cars, shrubs, a dumpster. Nothing special, nothing suspicious. That was the point. Back in New York, the story was no longer a whisper. Brooklyn, 1998, cold case solved, appeared as a question mark on late-night segments, anchors stretching words like taffy, dangling the possibility of closure in front of viewers' tired eyes. New suspect identified in decades-old disappearance, the ticker said. Chilling audio tapes at center of investigation. The public didn't care about the difference between possible and confirmed. They just liked the feeling of being close to an answer. In the cold case unit, nobody was celebrating. Vega stood at the evidence board, a constellation of photos, maps, and handwritten notes connected with thin red string. Lena's face anchored the center. To one side, a blurry shot of the old grocery store front. To another, a mugshot of Michael Caro from his 2005 arrest. Eyes expressionless, hair cropped short, features blurred by that same ordinary anonymity. Tape spectrograms, printed in color and pinned up, looked like abstract art. Only the people in that room knew that those streaks and spikes were fear graphed in frequency and time. Media's ahead of us, someone muttered behind him. Again. They'll burn through this angle in 48 hours, Vega replied without turning. Our job is what's left after the cameras move on. He knew the department brass was feeling the heat. Phone calls from city officials. Quiet pressure from the top. This case had become a symbol. Solve it, and you prove the system can reach back through time and drag justice out of cold shelves. Fail, and you add another line to the long, quiet list of unfinished business that keeps people locking their doors a little tighter at night. The DA's office agreed to a limited move. Not a full indictment, not yet, but they wanted Caro in the box again, this time not as a politely cooperating witness in his own kitchen, but under the hum of fluorescent lights in the hard chair that makes backs ache and nerves fray. An official interview at the precinct in his current city with local officers present and everything recorded, voluntary on paper, pressure in reality. The call was careful. Vega's voice was steady when he reached Caro. We appreciate your cooperation last time, he said. There are a few more details we need to clarify. If you're willing, we'd like you to come down to the station and talk, formally. just to clean up the record. On the other end, a pause stretched thin. Am I under arrest? No, Vega said, you're not. Another pause, a soft exhale. Then I'm not obligated to come. No, the detective repeated, you're not. But in cases like this, how people choose to help or not can matter later. It was a small threat, tucked inside polite language. He didn't know which part landed. Maybe it wasn't the words at all. Maybe it was the echo of that Brooklyn accent, a ghost from a borough Caro had probably told himself he'd left behind. He showed up. Of course he did. Men who like control don't always run. Sometimes they walk straight into the lion's mouth just to see if they can teach it to sit. He arrived on time, hair combed, shirt tucked in, carrying himself like a man who'd thought about what an innocent person would look like and built a costume around that thought. The interrogation room was small, painted a color that tried to be neutral and failed. A metal table, 2 chairs facing each other, a camera in the corner with a little red light that never blinked. The hum of the building's old HVAC system filled the gaps between sentences. Caro sat, folded his hands, and waited. When Vega walked in with a local detective, he greeted them with a nod that was almost friendly. You read me my rights, I should assume, he said, even if I'm not under arrest. Standard procedure, Vega replied, sliding a form across the table. We both know the drill. The words were recited, the pen scratched, the form slid back, the camera watched, silent and patient. They started with the safe questions again. Work history, schedules, the time in Brooklyn. Caro answered smoothly, filling in gaps with shrugs and small smiles. He remembered the grocery better this time. Details about the layout, the old cooler that rattled like it was trying to shake itself off the wall, he said, chuckling. Owner didn't want to pay to fix it properly. We did what we could, patching it up. And while you were patching it up, Vega said, voice even, did you ever invite anyone into the back to show them how it worked? No, Caro replied, without missing a beat. Why would I? Customers stay out front. That's the point of the counter. You ever let kids in, teens, ask them to help you carry something, show them a shortcut out the alley? His eyes cooled a fraction. You want to ask me if I abducted that girl, he said. Ask me. Don't dance around it. All right, Vega said. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands clasped. Did you abduct Lena Morales on October 15th, 1998? The room seemed to hold its breath. No, Caro said. No hesitation, no waver. He let the syllables sit between them like a coin landing flat on a table. And did you record audio of her in a confined space with a refrigeration unit running in the background? No. Did you ever record anyone in a situation they did not consent to? Did you ever capture the sound of fear on a cassette, Mr. Caro? The suspect's jaw flexed, just once. You've already decided it's me on those tapes, he said. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. We're here because your name sits at the intersection of a lot of small, ugly facts, Vega replied, because 17 years ago, you were in the exact right place to do something very wrong, because you later confined a woman in a room with a refrigeration unit next door, because we can hear a machine in those tapes that sounds a lot like the ones you worked with every day, because your voice pattern is uncomfortably close to one we've been listening to for months. That's why we're here. Caro watched him. The camera watched them both. Outside the room, in a monitor-lined observation space, a small group of officers and one DA sat with headphones on, listening for the moment something cracked. There are hundreds of men who worked with those machines, Caro said eventually. Hundreds whose voices probably land somewhere in the same range as mine. You ever think maybe you built your monster first and then went searching for a face that fit? That's a nice line, Vega said. Did you come up with it, or did you pull it from one of the forums? The slightest flinch, barely there but real. You spend time online, the detective continued. I've seen the activity. Cold case boards, true crime threads. You read about her. You read about the tapes. You see the way people talk about the suspect like he's some kind of shadow god, untouchable, everywhere and nowhere. I'm wondering if that appealed to you, Mr. Caro, being the ghost people chase. A muscle ticked at the corner of the older man's eye. You're giving whoever did that a lot of credit, he said. He's not a ghost. He's a coward who hides behind static. But he wants to be heard, Vega replied. He could have left no tapes, no recordings, no trace at all. Instead, his voice is on record, tied to that phrase. That's enough, over and over. That's not hiding. That's performance. For the first time, something like irritation flared in Caro's face. You're reading poetry into garbage audio, he snapped. Maybe some bored kid recorded a prank in his garage. Maybe the whole thing's a hoax. Maybe your missing girl ran away and you don't like that answer, so you went hunting for something more cinematic. Is that what you think happened? Vega asked. You think Lena ran away? I think I don't know what happened, the man said, voice dropping lower. And neither do you. You're just more comfortable pretending you do. The local detective shifted in his chair, about to interject. Vega held up a hand. There was something in the way Caro said cinematic that stuck like the word tasted familiar in his mouth. Let's talk about the second tape, Vega said. Found in 99, different borough, different girl, same hum, same voice at the end, same phrase. If it's all a hoax, it's a dedicated one. Then find your hoaxer, Caro muttered. I fix machines and stock shelves. I'm not some mastermind playing games with the NYPD from a basement studio. But you did like recording, Vega pressed. Your ex told us about the handheld recorder, about waking up with the red light on, about you saying it was an accident. The silence swelled again. Caro's eyes narrowed just enough to betray calculation. She's got a good imagination, he said, and a reason to paint me as worse than I was. We had a bad relationship. I'm not proud of it. I served my time. That doesn't turn me into the villain of every unsolved story you've got lying around. Did you ever say that's enough to her? Vega asked. Everyone says that, he snapped. Parents say it to kids. Teachers say it to students. Cops say it in interviews. You're hanging everything on 2 words that mean nothing. If they mean nothing, Vega said quietly, why are you sweating? A bead of moisture had formed at the man's temple, sliding down toward his cheek. He reached up, wiped it away with the back of his hand, and smiled. A tight, brittle thing. Because this room is hot, he said, and because you came here to make me the bad guy, and I'm smart enough to know how that usually ends. He leaned back in his chair. I want a lawyer, he said. The camera caught the moment, the request, the shift from conversation to protected silence. Outside the glass, the DA closed her eyes for half a second. There it was, the line. That's enough, spoken in a different language. The rest of the interview was brief, procedural, useless. Formally, he left as free as he'd entered. No cuffs, no charges, just a man stepping out of a station into harsh midday light, blinking as he adjusted to the open space. A reporter, tipped off by a source, shouted his name and got nothing but a raised hand to hide his face. The clip would air that night anyway, blurred but suggestive. Person of interest questioned in notorious Brooklyn cold case, the Chiron would read. In the squad room, they replayed the tape of the interview and fed Caro's speech into the analysis software. Not just the phrase, his entire vocabulary, every that's enough, every I don't know, every offhand quip. The comparatives came back in shades of probability, linguistic patterns overlapping, breath lengths aligning. It wasn't a magic bullet, it was a stack of small arrows all pointing in the same direction. The chief wanted to call it. This is him, he said, slapping a palm against the case file. We all know it. Let's stop pretending we don't. Knowing and proving are not the same thing, the DA reminded him. If we push this to a grand jury now on what we have, we risk losing. You want to walk into that room with tapes and vibes? They're going to ask for DNA, fingerprints, hair, fibers, witnesses. We have audio and a narrative. Juries don't convict on narrative. They convict on story plus evidence. Story plus evidence, Vega repeated later, alone in his office. That was what he'd been building, a story with enough weight to bend the evidence in one direction. And yet, somewhere in the back of his mind, a quieter voice whispered the possibility he didn't want to hear. What if the story was wrong? What if the pattern had seduced him? What if the hum of those machines and the shape of that phrase had pulled his investigation toward a man who fit too neatly, like a pre-cut mask pressed onto the wrong face? Sleep became abstract. At 3 a.m, his apartment filled with the low blue glow of waveforms flickering across his laptop screen. The tapes ran in loops, the spectrograms pulsed. He played them forward, backward, slowed down, sped up, searching for any noise he'd missed. A door creak, a streetcar bell, a distant siren that might anchor the recordings in a specific, provable place. That's when he heard it. Not in some dramatic burst, not in a cinematic jump scare, just a faint, different sound under the usual hum and static of the second tape. A low, 2-tone warble, rising and falling at steady intervals. He isolated it, his heart picking up speed. It wasn't part of the compressor noise. It wasn't a human voice. The tech, yawning on a late-night call, listened and blinked awake. That's not environmental, she said. That's electronic. Could be a pager, an old cell, some kind of alert system. They ran it against archived sound libraries. The match came from a device nobody used anymore. A late 90s security system panel that pinged a soft 2-note alarm when a door to a protected area was opened. Not a full siren, just a subtle chime. Something you could tune out if you heard it every day. Something you'd notice if you were listening for any detail that might save someone's life. If that chime was in the recording, it meant the room where the tape was made wasn't just any basement. It was somewhere rigged for security, an office, a storage facility, a site with monitored doors. The list of places where Caro had worked shrank again. One name moved up to the top, a small refrigerated warehouse that once stored meat and dairy for local restaurants, known for its outdated alarm system that had drawn fines for false trips. A system, records showed, that had used that exact model of chime panel, The warehouse had been sold, gutted, reborn as loft apartments with high ceilings and exposed brick, the kind of place where young professionals paid top dollar to sleep inside the skeleton of someone else's history. New walls over old scars, new floors over old cold. A search there, Vega knew, would find nothing physical, no bones, no tape reels, no visible evidence of what had existed in that chilled air years before. But the sound proved something. The man who recorded that tape had stood in a specific kind of room, near a specific kind of machine, under a specific kind of chime. And the list of people who'd had unrestricted access to that space during the right years was not long. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number flashed on the screen. "You're so close to your story you can't see past it." No name, no context. Just that line. He stared at it for a long second before forwarding it to the cyber unit. They traced it to a prepaid burner, bought with cash 2 weeks ago, then switched off for good. On the block in Brooklyn where it all began, nothing seemed to move, but everything had shifted. The alley was the same narrow cut between buildings. The light over the back doors still flickered. The wind still scraped trash along the ground. But now, when people passed, they glanced down the alley a little quicker, as if expecting to see a ghost standing there. A girl, a detective, a man with a cigarette and a calm expression, saying 2 words that had somehow become the spine of an entire nightmare. That's enough. What nobody could agree on. Not the cops, not the DA, not the family, not the strangers arguing online in the small hours, was what exactly was enough. Enough evidence, enough suffering, enough waiting, enough of a story to finally brand a man's name onto a case file in permanent ink. And somewhere far from the crime scenes and the evidence rooms, a fridge hummed in a quiet kitchen, its sound a perfect monotone, giving nothing away. The security chime changed everything and nothing at the same time. It was a sound no one would have noticed in 1999, a soft 2-note ping buried under the hum of compressors and the static of old tape. But in a cramped audio lab in 2020-something, it rang out like a bell tolling for a ghost. The system ID, the model, the brand, the lists, all of it pointed to one building, one warehouse, one cold rectangle on the city map where breath once turned to fog and steel walls sweated in the dark. On paper, the warehouse was clean. Sold, renovated, sanitized. Brick exposed, beams polished, the old steel doors replaced with sleek glass and coated entry pads. The brochure called the units industrial chic lofts with authentic character. It didn't mention the hum that used to live in the walls. It didn't mention the door chime. It didn't mention that somewhere deep in the bones of the place a girl had once whispered please into a recorder while a man waited, patient and calm, to say, "That's enough." Vega stood across the street the first time he went to see it. No warrant, no team, just a detective with a coffee gone cold in his hand, watching young professionals walk in and out with gym bags and laptops, carrying their lives through a space that had carried other stories before they were born. A couple laughed under the awning, keys jangling. A delivery guy buzzed a unit, shifted his weight, checked his phone. Ordinary, utterly ordinary, that was the point. He thought about the families who'd moved in after the renovation, how they'd bragged about the vibe of the place, high ceilings, big windows. You can feel the history, one online review had said. And they weren't wrong, they just didn't know what kind of history it was. You don't put possible crime scene in a rental listing, you paint over it, you install track lighting, you call it atmosphere and charge extra. The search warrant took time. Every line had to be justified. No judge was going to sign off on ripping through privately owned lofts because of a sound on a 20-year-old tape and a hunch about an ex-refrigeration tech. But the DA's office leaned on the chime, the service records, the overlapping dates, the access logs from back when the warehouse wasn't a lifestyle accessory, but a place where meat and dairy rolled in on pallets and left in delivery vans before dawn. Finally, reluctantly, the permission came through to search the basement, the residual common areas, the sealed mechanical rooms that hadn't been fully repurposed, the places no tenants had reason to visit. They went in early, before the building really woke up. The new management company watched them with tight smiles and crossed arms, worried about liability, worried about headlines, worried about anything that might crack the glossy shell they'd built around the place. "We had no idea," the representative said too quickly. "This is the first we're hearing of any connection to that case. This isn't about what you knew," Vega said. "It's about what the walls remember." The basement smelled like fresh paint and old dust. New pipes gleamed alongside rusted ghosts of older systems. They passed a door marked electrical, another marked storage, another that had no sign at all, just heavy hinges and a keypad lock that had been updated but not moved. Behind that door, the architect's plans told them, was the heart of the old refrigeration system, a maze of pipes, insulation, the former control room. The manager punched in the code, pushed the door open, and stepped back as if expecting something to lunge out. Nothing did, just cold air. Faint and stale, despite the space being unused. The walls were coated in fireproof white, but beneath that sheen, you could see the outline of removed panels, bolt patterns where equipment had once been bolted tight. The floor bore faint rectangular stains, darker than the concrete around them, like shadows of long-gone machines. The forensic team moved in with cameras and scanners, their footsteps echoing, no blood, no hair, no obvious marks carved into the walls. Time had done its erasing. But certain things lingered in ways bleach and paint couldn't touch. They swept luminol over drains, corners, seams. Nothing flared bright like in movies, just faint, ambiguous blooms in places where meat had once dripped and melted ice had carried everything away. In one corner of the control alcove, wedged awkwardly behind a newer electrical conduit, an evidence tech's gloved hand brushed what felt like plastic. They stopped, reached carefully, pulled out a small dust-filmed rectangle, a cassette case, empty, no label, no tape inside, just the shell. It could have meant nothing. It could have been trash that fell through a crack during renovation. It could have been dropped by anyone, any time in the previous decades. But when the tech passed it to Vega in a clear bag, weightless and insignificant, it felt like a missing tooth. One more gap in a jaw full of questions. Don't build a whole story around a piece of plastic, he told himself. But the story was already there. It always had been. A room like this. A hum, a chime, a cassette recorder in a man's hand, red light glowing in the dark. Back at the precinct, the team logged everything. The cassette case went into the evidence system with its chain of custody forms. Another artifact on a shelf of maybes. The lab would dust it, swab it, run it through the grinder of technology, hoping for a miracle. A partial print that survived paint dust. A trace of skin oil intact enough to say, "This person touched me." Nobody held their breath. The media, of course, didn't wait for lab reports. Police search loft building in connection with Brooklyn 1998 cold case. The headlines screamed online within hours. Drone footage showed officers going in and out of the side entrance, the camera panning dramatically to the brick facade like it could see past the walls to some invisible crime. Residents tweeted photos, posted shaky videos, tagged true crime accounts. A building that had spent years trying to sell itself as a lifestyle was now trending as a haunted address. In the middle of the storm, the Morales family was told just enough to keep them from finding out from the news. "We're exploring a location that might be connected to the case," Vega said over the phone. "I can't promise what we'll find." Her mother's voice was tight. "You always say that. You always say you can't promise." "I won't lie to you," he said. "Then tell me this," she asked. "Do you believe it's him? That man, the one on TV with his face blurred. Do you believe he's the one who took her?" Belief was easy. Evidence was hard. He closed his eyes. "I believe he's the best lead we've ever had," he said carefully. "I believe he's connected to the spaces where those tapes were made. I believe he's capable of what we hear." "That's not the same as saying yes," she whispered. "No," he admitted. She took a breath that sounded like it hurt. "When they put his name in the papers, when they say case solved for their shows, if you're not sure, if you can't put your hand on a Bible and say yes, it was him, don't you dare stop looking. Don't let them close this on a maybe." The call ended like a dropped glass, hard and abrupt. Across state lines, Caro watched the coverage play silently on his television, subtitles crawling under his own blurred silhouette outside the station door. He saw the aerial shot of the loft building that had once been a warehouse he knew by smell alone. He saw the words, "former employee," under a caption mentioning refrigeration work. His lips quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. On a small side table, next to an overflowing ashtray, his own recorder sat. Not the old cassette model, that was long gone, but a newer digital unit, sleek and small. He picked it up, thumb circling the red button, then set it down again. Silence pressed in around him. The only sound was the fridge in the kitchen, cycling on and off, a tame, modern hum that lacked the rattling personality of the old units. His phone buzzed, an unknown number. For a second he considered ignoring it, then he answered. "Is this Michael?" a man's voice asked. "Who's calling?" "Doesn't matter," the voice said, distorted just enough to be wrong. "You should know you're not the only one people are looking at." Click, dead. He stared at the phone. For the first time in a long time, something like confusion slid through the calm, not fear, not yet. Just the realization that maybe the story had picked up extra characters while he wasn't looking. Someone else playing with phones and fire, sending messages, dropping hints. Someone who knew about the case well enough to taunt the supposed monster at the center of it. Vega got a similar call from a different burner at 2:17 a.m. "You're chasing cold rooms and ghosts," the voice said. "You ever think the man you want isn't the one who built the stage, just the one who knew how to use it?" Before he could respond, the line went dead. For days, the anonymous messages became part of the landscape. Short texts, voicemails with static and half-heard words, a game of telephone played with missing pieces. Cyber traced as much as they could, found the same pattern. Throwaway devices, purchased in cash, activated briefly, tossed. Whoever it was knew the system, or understood enough about how not to be found that it didn't matter. On the 8th day after the warehouse search, the lab report on the empty cassette case came back. No usable fingerprints, no DNA, just layers of dust and flakes of paint, age, undetermined, origin, unknown, another maybe added to the pile. The chief called for a meeting. Everyone sat around the table, copies of the newest reports in front of them, the weight of the case pressing down like a hand on the back of their necks. We are not going to let some anonymous crank steer this investigation, he said. We stick to what we can prove. What we can prove, the DA said, is that a man with a history of confinement and a specialty in refrigeration had access to multiple spaces where these tapes could have been recorded. We can prove he was physically present in Brooklyn at the time Lena disappeared. We can prove his voice is statistically similar to the one on the tapes. We can prove the spaces line up, the machines line up, the timing lines up. What we can't prove is the one thing that matters, that he abducted her. So what do we do? Someone asked. We keep going, Vega said before she could answer. We stop waiting for a perfect moment and start looking for messy ones. People talk, especially when their pasts crawl out of the ground and start trending. Somewhere, someone worked with him in those rooms. Somewhere, someone saw something and convinced themselves it didn't matter. Now the story's on TV. Now they're thinking about it again. He was right. While they sat in that room, while they argued about thresholds and legal standards, somewhere across the river, a man in his late 40s watched a segment about the Brooklyn freezer tapes and felt his stomach drop. He saw the blurred photo of the suspect. He saw the shot of the old warehouse, now luxury lofts. He saw the freeze frame of a cassette graphic on the screen. And he remembered standing at a loading dock in '99 smoking a cigarette while a coworker disappeared into the back with a girl who did not belong there. He hadn't wanted to remember. He'd folded the memory up, shoved it into the back of his mind, told himself he'd misread, overreacted, been paranoid. He'd needed the job. He'd needed the paycheck. He'd told himself if something was really wrong, the cops would come. No one ever did. But now their number was on the bottom of the screen. If you have any information, it said. His hand moved before his fear could stop it. He dialed. Hours later, Vega sat across from him in a quiet interview room, pen ready, recorder on. The man's hands shook as he spoke. I don't know if she was that girl, he said. The one you keep showing. But there was a night, late. I was on dock duty. He nodded toward a printout of Caro's mugshot. He said he needed help moving some boxes in the back. Then he said, never mind, he'd handle it. I saw a kid. A girl, maybe 15, 16, for a second, just a second. Describe her, Vega said, pulse spiking. Dark hair, backpack, looked scared. I thought maybe she was his niece, or someone who'd gotten turned around. I don't know. It was late. I was tired, and then the door closed and the hum started, and I told myself it was none of my business. What hum? The big unit, he said. When they shut that inner door, it got loud. You could feel it in your teeth. I finished my shift. I went home. I came back next day. He was acting normal. Nobody said anything about a missing girl, so I just forgot, or tried to. Why didn't you call then? He stared at his hands. Because men like him look normal in daylight. Because I needed that job. Because I wasn't sure what I saw. Pick a reason. They all sound bad now. The room felt colder. The recorder on the table whirred quietly, capturing every word. Can you give me a date? Vega asked. A month, a week, anything. The man thought, rubbing his forehead like he could squeeze the information out. He gave them a rough window. It overlapped. That week, that month, that year. The time when a girl named Lena walked out of a library and didn't make it home. The witness wasn't perfect. His memory was flawed. His guilt had sharpened some edges and dulled others. But for the first time, someone had placed a girl like her and a man like Caro in the same breath, in the same hallway, with the same hum rising up behind a closed door. It still wasn't enough. Not for court. Not yet. But inside the narrative the city was building, inside the newsroom-ready headline that everyone could feel coming, the shape of the ending began to harden. Brooklyn, 1998, cold case solved. Warehouse worker exposed after decades of silence. Solved. The word hung in the air like a threat. Because if they used it too fast, too carelessly, it wouldn't just close a file. It would lock a door. And on the other side of that door, unanswered questions would keep breathing in the dark, humming like an old machine that no one bothered to unplug. The witness didn't look like a man who could tilt a case. He looked like a man who hadn't slept properly in 15 years, pale at the edges, hair thinning, fingers worrying the seam of a paper coffee cup as if it might tear under the pressure of what he was finally saying out loud. His name barely registered. What mattered was the picture he painted. A loading dock, a humming room, a girl who didn't belong there, a door closing on the sound of her fear. The statement went into the file. The recorder clicked off. The pen stopped moving. But the echo of his words didn't stop. It followed Vega down the hallway, into the elevator, back to his desk. I saw a kid. looked scared, then the door closed. It was the first time anyone besides a tape had spoken for her in that space. For once, the city hadn't swallowed the moment whole. It had left a witness behind. The DA's office leaned in again, this time with sharper eyes. "This is what we've been waiting for," one prosecutor said. "We have placement now. We can tie suspect, location, and victim profile to a specific scene. That's enough to move." There it was again, those words, coming from a different mouth in a different room. "That's enough." "Enough for what?" Vega asked. "For a grand jury," she answered. "For an arrest, for charging him in connection with Lena's disappearance and at least one more probable victim." Probable. The word knocked hard against the inside of his skull. Probable victim, probable predator, probable truth. The law didn't require certainty. It just required beyond reasonable doubt, and doubt, he knew, was elastic. Stretch it far enough and you could cover almost anything. They put the case together like a documentary with teeth, timelines, maps, audio comparisons, expert opinions, the chime, the hum, the tapes, the witness, the pattern of jobs, the confinement conviction, the anonymous messages, carefully stripped of their more sensational edges and reduced to what they truly were. Proof that someone out there knew enough about this to try to steer it. Maybe that someone was the suspect, maybe it wasn't. Either way, it told a story of a past that refused to stay buried. Behind closed doors, the grand jury listened. They saw the spectrograms. They heard the audio, cleaned but still raw, a girl's voice shaking in the dark, a man's calm cutoff. They were told about cold rooms turned into cages, about a warehouse now selling itself as industrial chic, where once upon a time a badly maintained security system chimed every time a door to a nightmare opened. They didn't see the alley on 4th and 92nd in person, but the photos, the diagrams, the videotaped reconstructions drew them there anyway. They didn't see Lena's mother cry. That part stayed outside the process, but her presence hovered over everything, a quiet gravity tugging at their decisions. Indictment came down like weather, not a sudden storm, but a shift in air pressure everyone had been feeling for days. The charges were heavy: kidnapping, felony murder tied to that kidnapping, multiple counts tied to Jane Doe victims, whose identities might never be confirmed, all anchored to the idea that the tapes were not hoaxes, not pranks, but recorded crimes. At the center of every count, the name Michael James Caro. The arrest was not cinematic, no SWAT team, no battering ram, just unmarked cars sliding up to a perfectly ordinary apartment complex. Officers at the door, a knock delivered by Knuckles and Badge in equal measure. He opened it wearing the same expression he'd already worn once for them, calm, almost curious. "Michael Caro," Vega said. "You're under arrest." There was a flicker then, not panic, not shock, something closer to disappointment. "You really are going with this," he murmured, almost to himself. "All right." He turned, put his hands behind his back before anyone asked, wrists ready for steel. The cameras caught it anyway. Somewhere a neighbor had their phone up. The footage would hit the networks within hours. A man led down a flight of stairs, head bowed, jaw clenched, the flash of cuffs at his back. "Arrest in Brooklyn, 1998 cold case," the caption would scream. "Alleged freezer killer in custody." Alleged, a small word, easily ignored when people's minds heard what they wanted. They got him. It's over. Except it wasn't. It never is. Not really. The jail intake processed him. Prints taken. Photo snapped. Property inventoried. The digital recorder on his table. Bagged. The phone. Bagged. The contents? Mirrored. Copied. Dragged into the evidence stream. He said little. Asked for a lawyer. Got one. Sat in a holding cell with his hands folded like a man waiting for a delayed train. Not a trial that might end in life behind walls thicker than any walk-in freezer. When the news broke officially, the neighborhood around 4th and 92nd exhaled and inhaled at the same time. Some people cried, some people cheered, some shrugged because 20 years of living with a ghost made it hard to suddenly swap him out for a man on a screen. On talk radio, callers debated whether the system had done its job or was just picking a scapegoat to make everyone sleep better. Inside the Morales apartment, the TV volume stayed low. Her mother watched without blinking as the anchor said the words. Brooklyn, 1998, cold case solved. Police arrest former warehouse worker in connection with teen's disappearance. That last part, in connection with, was softer, more precise, but the headline didn't care. "Do you feel relief?" a reporter asked her when they caught her leaving the building the next day, cameras shoved in her face. "No," she said, voice flat. "Relief is when somebody comes home." The clip made the rounds online, chopped and captioned, turned into a symbol. "Mother of missing teen refuses to celebrate," the blogs wrote. "Justice without a body. When is a case really solved?" The DA's office began to prep for trial like it was war. They knew what they were walking into. No scene left intact. No biology, no weapon, no confession. Just sound and pattern, witnesses and probability. They also knew what they had on their side. A jury pool raised on crime shows where cases always wrap up neatly, where audio and forensic miracles appear in the last 10 minutes and villains talk when they should stay silent. Reality wasn't that clean, but perception could be nudged. Defense came in hard, as expected. They painted Caro as an unlucky man with a bad record and worse timing. A convenient target, they said, for a police department desperate to hang a 30-year-old failure on someone's neck. You have built an altar to 2 words and a refrigerator hum, his attorney told the judge at a pre-trial hearing. You want to send a man to prison for life because his job put him near machines and your software thinks his voice might sound like some distorted tape from a trash can. In private, Vega almost admired the line. He hated it, but he knew it would resonate. Juries didn't like uncertainty, but they also didn't like the idea that the bogeyman might still be walking free. Fear was a tool both sides could use. While lawyers argued over admissibility and chain of custody, the anonymous messages kept coming. Not to the press now, not to random forums, but to him, to his encrypted work email, to a dedicated tip line, to a prepaid phone the cyber unit set up just to catch the voice if it came back. Sometimes it was a text, ask what he did before 1998. Sometimes a voicemail, static, then a distorted sentence. You're closing the door on the wrong side of the room. They traced what they could, each time the same dead end. Public networks, burners, no repeatable signature. If it was Caro, he was far more tech flexible than his profile suggested. If it wasn't, then the case had attracted something else, a parasite, a voyeur, someone addicted to the gravity of violence who wanted to sit in the control room of the story without ever stepping into the light. The prosecutors wanted to ignore it, keep the case clean. The chief wanted to smash it, flush out whoever was taunting his people. Vega wanted to understand it, because buried in the nonsense in the posturing were occasional lines that felt like they came from somewhere very specific, somewhere close to the bones of the case. You ever think the man you want isn't the one who built the stage, just the one who knew how to use it, the caller had said once. It stuck. Built the stage, used it. Back in the file, buried under property records and payroll logs, was a name that kept cropping up on invoices for the original warehouse. Not the owner, not the stock crew. A contractor. Security systems, doors, locks, alarm panels. The man who built the stage. He'd installed the very chime they'd heard on the tape. His name had been noted, then sidelined, because he'd moved away long before the suspected crimes. Because he'd gone out of business. Because he didn't fit the timeline as neatly as the refrigeration tech who'd been there every day. The police in '99 had interviewed him once, briefly, about whether anyone could have bypassed the system. He'd said no. End of story. Now Vega pulled that old interview transcript up and read it differently. The tone, the clumsy jokes about false alarms, the flippant line, you could march a marching band through there and no one would notice unless they were listening. At the time, it had sounded like a tech guy being cynical. Now, against the backdrop of anonymous calls and someone talking about building stages, it felt like something else. He tracked the contractor down. The man was retired now, living upstate, house on a quiet road, yard too neat for someone who claimed to be over it all. He opened the door with wary eyes when he saw the badge. I already talked to you people, he said, years ago. Talk to me again, Vega replied. They sat at a kitchen table that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. The contractor insisted he'd only ever been responsible for doors and sensors. You people get excited every few years, he said, shaking his head. It was a warehouse, nothing more. Whatever you think happened there, it's on whoever was running it, not the guy who wired a couple of panels. Do you know who was running it? Owners, managers, guys who came and went. I just installed what they paid me to install. Did you ever go back after hours? He snorted. They didn't pay me enough to work free overtime. The answers were glib, practiced, but when Vega mentioned the tapes, when he described the chime captured under the girl's voice, something flickered, very small, a hand tightening on a glass of water, a glance toward the back door as if checking it was shut. You're saying your system failed, he said, that a girl was taken in there and nobody responded. I'm saying your system heard it, Vega replied. The chime triggered when a door opened. It did its job. People didn't do theirs. For a moment, the old man's face folded in on itself. You don't know that, he muttered. You don't know what happened in that building. That's what I'm trying to fix, Vega said. What if someone used your knowledge to carve out blind spots? What if someone learned exactly how to slide through your system's cracks? Then that someone is smarter than you're giving him credit for, he shot back. You think your suspect is some blue-collar freezer jockey? You think he mapped out timing and doors and camera angles? Maybe. Or maybe someone else laid out the plan and he just walked through it. The words landed like a script being read, too sharp, too ready. Is that what you think happened? Vega asked quietly. Someone else planned it? I think, the contractor said, pushing back from the table, that I want a lawyer if you're going to keep asking me questions that sound like you've already decided the answers. There it was again. The same pushback from a different man. You built your monster first, Caro had said in the interview room, then went looking for a face that fit. On the train back to the city, Vega stared at the reflection of his own face in the smeared window and thought about monsters and masks and rooms built for cold. The case, once a straight line from alley to warehouse to suspect, had started to branch. Anonymous voices, old contractors, witnesses with selective memory. Every new lead opened another corridor. Some corridors looped back to the same man, some didn't. In the meantime, the trial clock ticked loudly. Pre-trial hearings set dates, expert witnesses prepped. The phrase Brooklyn 1998 cold case solved showed up not just in headlines now, but in official statements, press conferences, city speeches about renewal and perseverance. The word solved had been dragged out of the future and stapled onto the present, like a banner over a building whose foundation still creaked. Late one night, alone in his office, surrounded by printouts and photos and little rectangles of sound jagged across his monitor, Vega did something he hadn't allowed himself in months. He closed his eyes and imagined he was wrong. Imagined Kara was exactly what his lawyer said he was. A man with ugly history but no connection to Lena, dragged into the center of a narrative because his life's debris happened to line up with the department's hunger for closure. In that version, the tapes were still real. The hum still belonged to the same rooms. The chime still rang when that door opened. The girl still spoke into the recorder. The man still said, "That's enough." Only the face behind the voice changed. Someone else. Someone who'd stood just outside the edges of every frame they'd ever captured. He opened his eyes. The board on the wall didn't care about what if. It just held the story they had, pinned in red and black. Lena leaving the library, the alley, the backpack, the tapes, the warehouse, the witness, the suspect, the words, the hum. Soon, a jury would sit where he sat looking at a shorter court-approved version of that board. They'd be asked to decide if this was truth or just a story that fit a shape they recognized. They wouldn't hear the anonymous calls. They wouldn't meet the contractor. They wouldn't walk the alley at night and listen for ghost machines. If they convicted, the headlines would drop the question mark forever. Brooklyn 1998 cold case solved, full stop. If they acquitted, the same headline would still linger, now with a different twist. Brooklyn 1998 cold case solved, maybe never. Outside, somewhere in the city, a refrigerator kicked on in the dark and hummed to itself. Indifferent to verdicts, to headlines, to human certainty. It had one job, keep things cold. Everything else, fear, guilt, closure, was warmth the city generated all on its own.